Hey everyone, this is Daniel. And today I actually want to take a break from writing all new articles about these new features to do with Power Apps or Flow or any other new technologies that are coming out. And just to step back and still try to answer the same question which has been asked for a few years is what is going to be my replacement for InfoPath Designer and SharePoint Designer? This question has been one of the most asked questions on the events that I speak at, the user groups that I attend. Some people are testing new ones available. Some people are still trying to figure out what to do. And so that's why I just thought that this title, which is Forms Are Us, was the most appropriate one. Because here's why. If you've actually been to the toy store, which actually resembles the name a little bit, I've always seen that when I take my young boys over there, the overwhelming number of toy options available in the store pretty much just overwhelms them, and it's difficult for them to make a choice. And they see something which looks good right now, then they see something else, and oh, that looks good. So it's just that's why I thought this name was most appropriate for that. So as we move forward in this little video that I put together, we'll be looking at a few options available. Some of them I'll demo it. The ones which are more for on-prem, I'll actually deep dive a little bit on the back-end architecture of it, comparing them. I really encourage you to go through this article, have this discussion with your fellow engineers, have this discussion in your user groups. If you don't attend user groups, I encourage you to do that because that's where you get to have the most discussions about these things. Forums is another place. And hopefully this will answer a few of your questions. So here is my contact information. Hopefully it has some information that you're looking for. Otherwise, I can also hopefully respond back to you if any questions you have. So this just gives you a little overview of the things that I want to cover. I'll be looking at things such as Excel survey, Forms stands for Microsoft Forms and Power Apps, and we'll also look at some third-party applications. We'll look at all the options available and we'll focus and deep dive on two of them. But the reason I wanted to stay with three of these Microsoft ones available is because Forms obviously is in the preview, but it is still available out there. And at the end of the day, it all boils down to your requirements. What are your needs? And it's possible that what you're doing right now with InfoPath Designer and SharePoint Designer may not be able to have a one-to-one replacement, but these things are pretty close to what you're looking for. And sure, if you can just tweak and accommodate some of your changes that you need, these could very well be your replacements over there. So other thing I want to do was I wanted to show you this little clip art that I came up together because as I was researching to see what are the possible options out there as a replacement in InfoPath, these are the whole bunch of them that I came up with. And then again, it boils down to that scenario, right? That you're a little kid who's going into this massive toy store and you see all these options over there and you're just completely mesmerized to make a selection. But before I even go into starting to talk about these scenarios, there was a video which was actually recorded over a year ago. It's actually available right now on Microsoft Channel 9. I really thank the ShareGate team to put that video together. And I want to take some time to actually look at some sections of that video. The video is about 11 minutes long, so we may not go through the whole thing, but there's significant sections where all these MVPs are talking about key topics of discussion. So I want to take some time to view just some sections of that video, and then we'll look at all these other options.
And of course, the big questions, the info paths, the workflow, the forms, the workflows. I want to ask you, each of you, what are you doing today to solve that problem at the office, right? The forms, the workflows.
So I guess I'll take my first shot at it. As a developer, we tend to just go on our own solution. Obviously, every time this forms conversation comes up, I think people lump it all together. And what I mean by that is there's actually two different segments. There's end users or power users, and there's developers. I think for us right now, I see people coming to us and say, "Hey, build us a form still. Is it the most cost effective? Is it,
Yeah.
No, but you do you're able to meet your requirements, although you're going to spend a little more money, right? But
I'm trying to live in that mobile-first, cloud-first world, and I believe that as we start to build new applications for people, the consideration that we have to have is to build with the thought of mobile and then work your way backward. The way that I think about the solution is that if you solve the mobile problem, you've solved all of the other problems that you're going to have down the pipe anyway, because you're making something lighter, you're making it more responsive to use. So it already solves your performance problem. It already solves your usability, or it should solve your usability problem. Forms in that aspect then needs to be transformative, that it can be used on an app. It can't be clunky. And a lot of people make investments in InfoPath, I know, and it's going to be a difficult conversation to have with them, because people have made bets on their career saying we're going to do InfoPath. And we're telling them, hey, that has to evolve.
Okay.
I agree with everything that you just said, but poor Karen in accounting that needs to create a simple form and a workflow has not given one iota of thought to performance, and doesn't really need to, because she's given a tool and she expects that tool behaves a certain way. So I think that there's multiple fronts on the forms and the workflow solution that need to be solved. So what I say right now to organizations, and the advice I'd give, is that it is a strategic decision for what you guys are going to do for forms, because you're making an investment in whatever you do. If you really need, at this point in time, power users to be able to go in and build their own forms with no IT experience, then you need to purchase a third-party tool. It's a big deal, and people need to think about it. And if you're building nothing but InfoPath forms all day long, probably need to have a conversation.
Forms are not a thing. We use forms sometimes in our lives. We type stuff into them, and then data goes somewhere, right? That form is not a thing to us, usually. InfoPath forms are way overkill for a lot of things. List forms are overkill for a lot of things. Note cards are fine too. It depends on what we're doing, right? Doing things, right? Your business isn't going to stop. If you need a new form, you're going to build a new form in Word or, InfoPath or whatever it is, right? And just deal with it.
So Excel surveys has been around for a while, and that's one of the first forms option that I want to look at. As you can see, the Excel surveys announcement was made by the OneDrive team back on November 8th of 2012. So it's been about 5 years now since it's been there. So before I talk about the changes that are going on, let me just show you one of the Excel surveys. That one of the ways you can build it is in an actual SharePoint site's document library. You can have the option to create Excel survey over here, but there's a catch to that. What you need is your site collection. You need to actually go to your site collection, select it, make a change to its sharing, and in the sharing you have to select allow sharing with all external users and by using anonymous links. Once you go ahead and do that and you save it, then you will be able to see this Excel survey option. And then you can click on that and you can give it a name, say test survey, create it, and it'll open up my Office Online, and I can start building my Excel survey. It goes to Excel Online and I can start building it over here. So that's basically how we were able to build it. There's also, as far as the building factor goes, there's so many options. There's text, paragraph, number, date, choices, all of these good things over here. You can go ahead and even make sure that they are required, non-required. The response type, you can make them as however you want, like I just showed. And it's pretty straightforward. It's a very simple form. You can't make it very fancy. It does save it into Excel, so you by default you can go ahead and do any of your reporting directly over here. Let me save it, test survey, and when I save and view it, it shows you basically what your form is going to look at. If you were paying attention in the back, it goes ahead and creates these columns over here. Anytime you want to edit it, you can straight away come back to your Excel over here, and in the home, you can select on survey and you can edit it. So that's basically how Excel survey works and how it's available over here. Now, there's been some recent changes going on that I've noticed, which I want to make sure I bring that to your attention. Change number one is, in the past, you could go to your OneDrive and you can go ahead and select new and you could create your Excel survey. Now it's called as Forms for Excel. But when I click on it and it asks me to put in a name, I say this is also test Excel form. I create that. Instead of opening up that Excel online and showing me the form, what it does is it takes me to Forms Preview. So this is another new Forms feature that I was actually going to talk about next, but it shows up over here because I believe, and it, from what it appears to be, that this is going to be the future of Excel survey, and that's why they're leaning towards changing the name back on the OneDrive to Excel Forms, and when you try to create another one, it brings it back over here. So time will tell if this is exactly what I predicted it to be, but we'll see. That's one thing. It already went ahead and saved it. So let me go back to my Excel survey, go back to my OneDrive. And once that shows up, we can see that the one that I just created, the test Excel form, it is available over here. And right now it's only for me. That's fine. But if I can go ahead and delete it, I seem to have a little difficulty deleting it over here because it says that this form was basically, it is locked for deleting. So the next thing I want to do is let me go back to my form. And I see that I have the same one, which was the test Excel form. I have it over here, test Excel form. So let me go ahead and delete that from here. I'm able to delete it, go back to OneDrive, and if I go ahead and hit F5, I still see it available over here. And if you notice, it says it's a SharePoint app form. So this was the first form that I wanted to talk about, which is still available internally. Internally, if you go to your internal site, you are able to still create and use it internally. When you try to create that external one, as long as you made the changes for your site collection, it will no longer be Excel Survey, but it becomes Microsoft Forms. So let's actually take a look at Microsoft Forms and see what it has to offer. So this is Microsoft Forms, and right now it is in the preview mode. In my mind, when I see something in preview mode, I lean on the option of, well, if this is as good as the Forms is in preview, I just wonder what new features and functionalities are going to come out. So I try to keep an optimistic approach to all these new functionalities and tools that are coming out. But there's some things that I do want to point out, especially if you haven't started using it or testing it and are leaning towards doing that. There's some things that I do want to point out to you, which are pretty good. So now that I'm in my Office 365 tenant, I do have forms over here. I went ahead and let's do some testing. Okay, so new form, when I click on it, what I wanted to show was just by opening it, you see it starts saving it. I don't have any button to save it. It's just being saved. It directly gets saved. So when I go back to the forms, I already have a saved form, something that I just clicked to view it. It went ahead and saved it. Not a bad thing, just something that I want to point out. Same thing happens with quiz. Went ahead and opened it, saved it, and there you go. Now I have a quiz too. All right, so let's take a look at the form. Let me go ahead and add some questions. I open up question number 1. Let's say I put option 1, 2, 3, and then option other is there by default. Now, say if I made things a little bit more, detailed over here, such as, how was the session? And after that, you've added a whole bunch of options, right? You say things such as good, bad. You already have other, so now I'll add ugly. And right now, I just put that as a radio option. But say if you wanted multiple answers, you can go ahead and change those radio buttons to checkbox. You want to make this as required. I go ahead and put that option. So there's quite a good functionality and features available. Here's the next thing that I really liked about this. What if you want to add other questions in this survey where the answers or the choices are going to be the same, just the questions keep changing? Well, then you can use this copy function over here. So I just selected that, and now the next question came up, and I can change that question to, how was the speaker? And then again, you already have these over here. It also remembers the selection that you made, which was required. I can change that to multiple answers over here. Select thing over another topic where I already put how was the session, how was the speaker, how was the demo. See, so it just made things a lot easier to even build a form. A very simple form that you want to build. Doesn't have to have a lot of rules, a lot of formatting, anything like that. A simple form that you want to build, and Forms Preview works really well for that. Okay, so now we went ahead and build the form. Let's just call this a survey. So I just typed that in. It's already saved, and I have a survey form. Now, if, for example, you're going to use the survey form often, again and again, then you can just use this as a template. And after that, you can go ahead and basically copy it, and it'll build the next survey, which is survey 2. So you can always keep templates of something that you plan to use again and again. Just build the template, keep it available, and then you can do a copy and paste, and change the name, maybe change a few questions here and there. But you've already made things a lot easier, a lot faster for yourself. Again, this is Forms. It's in the preview stage. A great tool for a quick and easy solution that you want. Other things I liked about Forms, which I want to point out, was in the theme, you can actually change any of the coloring that you want. You can even add your own image or clip art that you want. The other thing was you can preview it. So you can, right off the bat, you can preview what it's going to look like as a computer image, as a mobile image. Very good preview options available over here. Second thing is in the sharing, you can actually save and share this with other tenants as well. So if you have, say, a tenant for whatever reason, which is just used as your demo ones to build something, and you want to save it, send it to your official production ones, we'll just copy the link, log into the other tenant, paste the link, and now you can save it over there. Great way to share this or move it from a prod to dev, anything like that. It's a great way to do that. Second thing is in the settings. In the settings, you can make this form as an anonymous form so that everybody can use that. I think that this is a good option for a frequently asked questions. For a Q&A type of a situation on your website, or any other event that you want where attendees or people who are from outside, not part of your organization, they can go ahead and just use that. And then you also have options to accept the responses, put a start date, end date. If for some reason you are using this as a small test, then you can make sure that people don't memorize the sequences of the questions and answers, because you can now shuffle questions around, set up email notifications. These are some great options over here. The one thing I want to point out is if you are going to use the anonymous option, then watch what happens when I click on that button. And this is again for obvious reasons, because now you have the record name and the one responsible person is grayed out because it's going to be anonymous. So this is just an overview of how you can use Forms, which is in the preview mode, and you can use that as a selection to build the form. I also want to quickly touch on the flow. So when I went to my flows and I just typed in Forms, look at how many options which are already available for templates. It's quite a few of them. You can take the form and do some email notifications through Outlook. You can take the responses and save it on a SharePoint list. Quite a few out-of-the-box functionalities over here. Again, I want to point out that this is still in preview mode, but just the out-of-the-box functionalities of using Forms and its integration with Flow is a lot nicer. Right off the bat, this has a lot of great features. And again, you can use this as anyone with the link can respond. So a great place to start using outside your environments on websites or where anonymous people access that. So let's take a look at this last Microsoft Forms option that I want to show you, and that's Power Apps. And I say last, but it's definitely not the least, because Power Apps has a lot of functionality that you can use. And for the sake of this example, I'm going to use Microsoft SharePoint as an option to store the data and use that as a reference point. But you can use Power Apps for everything. You can also use it for SharePoint on-prem or SQL on-prem, as long as you have the on-premise gateway installed and configured. So before we look at the app, here's the SharePoint list. I call it PA for Power Apps. But this list basically has simple columns to store the information. And that's what I'm going to do over here on my Power App. So on the Power App, I'm going to call this as Microsoft Campus, subtitle, location in Charlotte. Description, a great place for user groups to meet. This is learn and network. So for now, I'm just going to put my address and the Microsoft Campus address over here, 055 Microsoft Way. City is Charlotte, North Carolina, and the zip is 28273. So what I've done over here is I've just filled a simple form. Now with this information put in over here, if I click on view the map, it actually shows me the map. And this is basically in this map, I can go back and click over here and I can enter my address. So in one place, I can do both of these things. Let me go and click on done. Because when I click on done, it will take me back to this screen and it shows me my new entry that I just put in. But also let me go back to my SharePoint list. So when I click, just to refresh that screen on my SharePoint list, it comes up with my new item. And that's the same one I just put in, Microsoft Campus, location in Charlotte, and all the information that I just filled in. So this basically makes a good connection straight to your SharePoint list. The form is definitely more presentable, cleaner, and I can always go back in over here. I can edit it. But what I want to do is actually delete it. So if you've come to this form the first time, usually it'll always have the first one selected. So I can select the other one and it'll refresh. But what I need to do right now is select the last one, and I want to go and delete it. So when I click on delete, it actually takes me to this screen and says, would you like to delete this inspection? I would say yes, delete it. So now it is deleting. It took it off from the first screen over here. But if I go back and just refresh this list, as you can see, that item is no more. So the form or the Power Apps form is actually a really great way to go ahead and make that integration. And I believe the Power Apps form is actually one of the great ways to replace InfoPath Designer, especially if you're planning to use SharePoint Online. Because in SharePoint Online, you've got the functionality in Power Apps to create different environments and go ahead and make all these connections. You've got so much more data loss preventions and governance functionalities available. So my recommendation is that if you are already a SharePoint Online user and if you're trying to figure out what's the forms option for that, then definitely give Power Apps the first priority, because Power Apps and Flow is such a good replacement for InfoPath Designer and SharePoint Designer. So now that we've actually looked at the Microsoft options for forms, I want to switch our attention to these third-party applications, the two of them that we'll look at. And I also want to focus on the on-prem versions of these two third-party applications. And I want to actually deep dive a little bit more on the architecture of that. So in the next set of videos, you'll actually see how I've gone and installed the third-party application specifically on SharePoint Server 2016. How are we able to go and configure that and take a look at that more in detail. So here's the next section of it. So here we're going to look at the installation of Clasys, which is a third-party apps forms for SharePoint. We've started the prerequisites checking over here, and the installation is going well. It goes ahead and starts to create the installation. Yeah, go ahead and select the license agreement, and that's moving forward. Go ahead and check all the configuration options I have. It is doing Windows authentication, so I'll go ahead and test the connection. The connection is good. That's where I'll click on next. For now, I'm only going to select, actually I'll select both of those sites. I'll skip the SSL and I'll click on next. It's still moving forward, and therefore the installation will start. It gives you the option to display the log files, and I really like that. So what I've actually done is I've actually speeded up the installation process. That way you don't have to wait through the whole thing, but all in all, the installation has been going very well. One thing I do want to point out that it was in my dev environment, which only had 8 gigs of memory. But anyway, while the installation is going on, when I go ahead and look at my central administration, we quickly notice that it was there was a already solution over there. So I'm back over here doing the installation, and so far so good. Nothing to be concerned about. But I do really like this logging feature which it has, because it really gives me good updates right down to which of the sites and the subsites have the feature installed and how the installs are going. And it's similar in SharePoint how we have ULS logs, where you can always go and refer to. This one over here is actually giving me the live logging features over there. Okay, things are still moving along, so that's good. While that's happening, one thing I can point out is that in my environment, this test environment over here, I have a 2-server environment. So I've got the SQL server, and I've got an application server which is also being used as a web front-end server. And again, these are just test VM environments. That's why the installation is a little bit slower. But all in all, it is moving pretty effectively. If you look at the log files, what it does is it goes ahead and adds a solution file or a WSP file, and then it goes ahead and deploys it. So that section of the installation is where it actually takes the most time. It's not the application installation itself, it's the adding the solution and deploying it. That's where it takes time. So it looks like things are still moving along and progressing well. Okay, so at this point, see that there's some changes going on over there. Yep, that's why the entire site, or the SharePoint sites, including central administration, is inaccessible. So let's take a look at the IIS over there. When I look at the application pools, so far those look good. Some of them have stopped over there. You can see that it's just the central administration, but that's pretty normal, especially when you're doing such a big farm level installation. Again, this is all normal, so I don't see that as a problem. The installation is going very smooth. Nothing to be concerned about. Okay, so let me just go back to IE browser, refresh it. Just want to keep an eye. I'm trying to gauge to see at what point of the installation does my SharePoint environment come up. Okay, the configuration, the logging is pretty good. I don't see any errors show up so far. It looks like we are almost at the tail end of it. Alright, let me refresh my IIS. Okay, everything is online. Let's refresh the browser. Okay, this one installation, look, it's completed. Click next and finish. on the SQL Server, you see I have that apps form DB. That's the actual database that I have, which is tied to my classes. So right now I'm just refreshing my center administration. As you can see, it came up over there, and now I have 3 of these solutions which are all deployed. And now the classes configuration page, or its administration page, is coming up. And once that comes up, you will see that it has the place where I go ahead and add the license. But all in all, it has been pretty successful. So here we go. Right click, run as administrator, and this is where it all starts. So okay, this verifies that it is for SharePoint Server 2016. I'll click through next. Yeah, I'll go and automatic install. Yep, I want both workflow and forms. So here's the installation, and it's preparing files, and I'm installing this directly on my server. So let's see what happens. Alright, so it's already launching the central administration. I already had that browser page open on the background, which is fine. It's just opening it up again. So let's see what its default page URL is. While it's still doing that, I want to take a look at what's going up. And it looks like it's almost finished. So while that page is opening up over there, let's scroll up and just take a quick look at what happened. I think that the installation was pretty smooth. What we saw over here was when it was deploying its farm level solutions, my server, or my dev environments are actually pretty slow. It only has 8 gigs of memory dedicated to it. That's why it took a little bit of time. But this over here was the installation was just in a wait mode while the solutions were actually being deployed. So this is not an error by no means. It was just going through for the solution to get deployed. Again, after that, everything goes pretty smooth. Again, there's a new solution that is deployed. There's a wait time, and that happens a few times. So again, that red text over there is by no means an error. It's just I think the hardware resources on my server. So there was something which really caught my attention, and that was the certificates. Now, in the previous video, when we saw the installation of classes, I didn't see any certificates getting installed, at least not that I was aware of in the installation. But over here, in the logging over here, and this is what I call logging, this text that it is showing, it says installing required certificates, and it goes ahead and adds a whole bunch of them. I, for one, do not see this as a bad thing, because certificates always directly reflects security. So if it is adding its own certificates, that means it's already taking care of the security factor in the back end. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then again, there were some more solutions that were deployed, and after that, looks like it's pretty much done. Again, this over here, I don't see that as error, but it looks like it was pretty successful. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Let me close this, and we are now still waiting for this page to open up. I'm not really sure what page it is opening. But what I'm interested to see is exactly how many solutions were deployed at the farm level. What else I noticed, I mean, if you recall the previous video, that was when I was doing the installation of classes. All in all, there were actually 3 farm level solutions deployed. So at least I remember that. So here you go. It opened up and it took us straight to the solutions page. So Places had 3. Nintex has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A whole bunch of them were 7, and this enterprise one hasn't even been deployed yet. So I wonder if that was the error, but we'll find out. Also, the other thing I immediately noticed was now on central administration itself, it has Nintex administration. And that was actually the reason why I had opened up the previous page and kept it, because I haven't refreshed this page yet. And you don't see that Nintex administration. That's actually now as an added functionality. So if I go back over here and if I just refresh it, watch, you'll have that Nintex administration show up over there. And so that's what it is. So looks like the installation was pretty smooth. Let's go into, well, before we go into Nintex administration, I want to take a look at my services now and see what new services we have going on over here, and if there's anything to do with actually Nintex. And I'm seeing a few over here. So I already see 1, 2, 3. These are Nintex services that are actually running. On the Places side, there was actually an option to help you kick off workflows from Places form. I didn't select that for the installation. I'm glad it gave me that option to do that selection, because when I was installing Nintex over here, I didn't see that option. It by default went ahead and created these services. Again, it's not a bad thing. It's just by design. But on the Places side, I do want to point out that it does also have the option to kick off workflows directly from its app form. But to do that, it will have to install this service over here, which will constantly be running on your server. So again, that's just 2 similarities. It's Nintex over here, and so does the Places. Another thing is, let's take a look and refresh the IIS. Okay, so the IIS, not seeing anything which is specific on the pools over here. Refresh that. Nothing specific on the pools over here either. If I go into central administration, let's take a look at some of these subfolders. Yep. So in the VTI bin over here, when I was installing Places, I immediately noticed that they had 3 of them, and I see the exact same thing on Nintex as well. So Places has 3. It does update the VTI bin on the central administration. Both of them take care of that. So, or make that change, which means there is significant farm level configuration even on the IIS service over here. So that's a very key thing to realize. And then also let's take a look. Well, actually, for the Places, for the Nintex, you want to go into the administration over here and take a look at that. All right, so it opens up. There's the option for database management. So there's 2 types of databases. There's one for the Nintex form and there's one for the workflow. So let's go and configure both of those. It automatically recognized the database server that is used by the actual SharePoint farm. This is brilliant. I like the way it took care of that. However, it does give you the option to install it on a different database server and a different instance and a different database. So that's at your discretion. But for the sake of this example, I will go ahead and just use that. So let me finish that process. It says it's in the provisioning database. And that one's done. So let's go ahead and create another one for the workflow. Let's click on that link. Again, it automatically picks up the existing server that my SharePoint farm is using, and it already allocates to that. It also tells me, do you want to just connect to an existing database? I don't have one, so I'll just leave that as it is. I do like that it gives you the authentication option as well, and it also gives you the failover, which is huge for high availability environments. Right here in the installation, it lets you take care of the high availability feature. So this is pretty good over here. So I'll just do OK. All right, and so we got this database also installed and configured over here. I want to pause on the SharePoint side for a minute and let's switch over to the SQL Server. This is my SQL Server. Let me just refresh it. And this is my SQL Server 2016. This was the instance, if you recall. That's what Nintex picked up. So that's the instance. And in that instance, what I wanted to call out was this app forms DB. That's the one which is there for Clasys. And then for Nintex, we should have two over here. So there was the Nintex form database, and there was the Nintex workflow database. And I like the way that both of these third-party applications put the DB over there, because the naming convention is really good. It tells you which one of these directly are for a form and a workflow. Just out of curiosity, let's just compare quickly how its tables are. Again, because this is pure focus on the backend databases and basically on the farm level configurations and the installations. So it does have quite a few database tables over here. Also, there's quite a few views. At least there were views on the Clasys side. Let's just double check to see if the upgrades. Yeah, I remember that. On the views, there were a lot more views on the Clasys side, which to some extent does help on the reporting factor. But on the Nintex forms, there weren't any. Let's just take a look at the tables on on its workflow side, and there's a lot more tables on the workflow side. Let's just see, are there any views on the workflow side? And yep, there's some views on the workflow side as well. So, quick recap over here on the database is that each of them, the third-party application, which is Clasys, and the third-party application, which is Nintex Form and Nintex Workflow, both create their own databases, and their naming conventions are really good. So back to the administration side, which is the Nintex administration. Let's go back over here. There's something called Web Application Activation. Let's take a look at that. So on the web application, I have picked up all my web apps. Right now I only have 2, I believe. In fact, let's take a quick look at that. How many do I have? Actually, right here, I'll be able to do that. So if I click on Change Web App, by default, it picked up my sites. So I only have 3. Obviously, central administration is when you do the install. But I want to use my test. So on the test, that's what I've selected. Let me go ahead and activate that. And just to point out that this installation was done with the 30-day trial. So if for whatever reason it comes up with a licensing request, this is why it was, but it didn't. So that's actually pretty good. The 30 days trial licensing is a full-blown thing, and they're not putting any limitations over there. So kudos to you guys on Clasys for giving that type of licensing for the 30 days. Messaging and notifications, I'm going to leave that off for now, but all in all, it looks pretty good over here. So on the installation side, I think it was very successful. And I again, kudos to the Nintex team to build such a smooth installation process on the SharePoint Server 2016. It does have a lot more installation steps that when we saw in the log. Things such as the certificates were added over there. Again, that's a security feature, and I'm all for that. There were definitely more services over here. I saw that on 3 on the Nintex side, and it doesn't ask if you want to do it, which means it is part of the installation. On the Clasys side, when I installed it, it gave me the option if I wanted to select that, and it told me that that option was to kick off workflows directly from the form. I didn't choose that, which is why that service wasn't here. And then Clasys doesn't have any addition in the central administration. Nintex does. Nintex administration directly comes into central administration, which itself also is a pretty good feature because all this type of administration or this level of administration should be done by farm level administrators anyway. And if the farm level administrators have access to central administration, then they can just, one-stop place for even the Nintex as well. So I think the design was pretty good over here. So I'm hoping that this actually gives you a good look and feel to see how the installation goes over here. And we've just barely scratched the surface on the Nintex side, but I just wanted to focus on the installation. I wanted to see the changes happening on IS side, changes happening on the database side, and also on the services that are happening over there on basically on the SharePoint servers. So hope you guys benefited from this. Okay, so now we need to go ahead and add the Nintex licensing. Let me go to the administration, which I'm already here, Central Administration, go to Nintex Administration, and in licensing. I've already gone ahead and added the Nintex workflow license. And just so that you guys know, the workflow licenses come as an NLFX file. And so I got two. One was for the workflow, and now I'm going to go ahead and add the one for the forms. So let me import the license and browse. Let me add the form, upload license file, and do the import. And so now, as you can see, before it was gray, and now it's turned blue. So I've got them all done, both of them. So what I need to do is now actually go back to the web application activation, because I showed that before, but it didn't work. So let me now go and pick the correct web application, which is this one, the 2016 site. I'll just do all content web application and let me activate it. So it says it's working on it, and this shouldn't take long. It looks like it's finished. So let's check out my actual sites now. Okay, so let me go to my site. I'll go to my team site. And this is my on-prem, again, as a reminder, 2016. Okay, so when I click on the settings, you see this app forms. Now that app forms comes from the Clasys side. In fact, when I click on it, you'll see that it takes me to app forms, which is almost like the R configuration, central administration. And I did this on purpose. Currently, with this version of app forms, Clasys app forms, it does require Silverlight. I have been given an update from them that they are in the process of switching this over to HTML5, which is again a huge improvement on that side. So kudos to their team. But for now, you still have to have Silverlight installed. So I'll install this, and we'll come back to that. What I want to do though is go to site settings. Let's take a look at some of my site collection features. So in my site collection features, I see a few things. I see Clasys App Forms browser. I got two of them over here. And now when I go down, I see a few of them for Nintex as well. I like that they have quite a few options over here. We just need to make sure that those are also activated. And other things I want to do is quickly just go to some of my other site collections as well. So let's go to my search, and this is another site collection. So when I was able to install the Clasys and Nintex, it should basically pick up on all of them. So this is app forms again. So when I click on it, you'll see that Silverlight thing. This is actually taken to a pre-configuration. Again, Silverlight, site settings, its site collection features, Clasys is active, and then I need to just go ahead and activate the Nintex form over here. So everything is good as far as the installation. Both of them did a side-by-side comparison, Clasys and Nintex, and I see the installation was very smooth. Once again, as a reminder that on the Clasys side, I was able to choose the option if I wanted this one service, which will go ahead and kick off workflows. And it gave me the option, so that way I didn't have to select it. Nintex didn't give me any options as to what I wanted to select, but obviously I was only installing the app, the forms and the workflow. And but I like that it went ahead and automatically took care of all the certificates that had to be installed, because that's huge from a security standpoint. I also noticed that both of them on the server side were pretty much the same, especially on the IIS. They went ahead and picked the correct web app over there, and in the INET folder on the correct subset of that on the INET folders, you could see that there were all these upgrades made over there. So bottom line is it does install, it's a farm level solution. So it will affect your entire web application on the back end. And then it also went ahead, you have the option to install the SQL database over there. And you can select which one you want. By default, it selected the SharePoint database and the SharePoint instance, but you have the option to select the other ones as well. So all in all, this was just a really good comparison to install it at the farm level for both Places and Nintex. So in closing, I hope that this vlog has been a little bit helpful to you to make some decision as to which form should be the best one for you, and how we were able to look at some online functions and options available. We did look at Excel survey, and right now it is a little unclear as to what's going to be the future of Excel, but I still was able to demo to you what its functionality is. We looked at forms, we looked at some examples over there, we looked at some of the key features available in forms and how it can integrate with Flow. Power Apps is definitely one of my highest recommendations if you are already a SharePoint Online person. I know we didn't look much into Flow, but there's a lot of blogs already available. A lot of my blogs available on Flow, and I highly recommend you to check out the Flow Microsoft community for that. And then for the on-prem ones, we looked at both Places, we looked at Nintex. We'll deep dive a little bit into its installation and its configuration, its integration with SQL, its integration with IIS, and I hope that that has helped you clear some doubts on that. So I ask that you make this decision quickly, or at least start making the decision as to what you need to decide as your replacement for InfoPath Designer and SharePoint Designer. And even if you don't want to go live with it, start testing these out so you guys can make a firm decision to match what your requirements are. Thanks.